I was in Korea, in the war in Korea, and there's an incubation period for malaria, and I came home, and then I collapsed with malaria. And so there I was, I'm very, very thin. I lost a lot of weight, a slightly yellow complexion, and a thick Cockney accent. And I knew I would never be rich or famous. You absolutely knew that. And so I went into repertory for 9 years and learned how to be an actor in order to become the best possible actor I could become. Not the best possible actor, because there'll always be, whatever you do, people who are better or worse at what you do. I just started to be the best possible actor I could be, and that was the end of that. I think it just came from knowing that I was never going to be like Laurence Olivier or people like that, or John Gielgud, great theatre actors, or big movie stars like Cary Grant and Robert Taylor and John Mills in England, or people like that. But I just decided to make myself the best that I could possibly make myself without any reference to anyone else. To me, I'm always disgusted by war. It's always started by men who are too old to go. That's the start. And then they send the young men who are too stupid to know what they're getting into, like me. And then you wind up in Korea with the American Marines, which is not a very good idea. and no, I mean, it's the most terrifying ordeal that you can think of, and you have to do things that you would never think of doing. But there was one great advantage to me from the war, which was that we got into a situation on a patrol where we were surrounded by Chinese and we knew we were going to die. But what you worry about when you get into that situation, are you going to be a coward? Are you going to be yellow and run? And there were only 4 of us, a little tiny patrol. And we all said, well, we're going to make this as expensive as we possibly can, our deaths. And we were going to do that. And the officer said, let's go towards their lines and go right round. And so we went back. They were waiting for us to go back to our lines, the Chinese. And then we went back to the Chinese line and went right the way round them and back. And so we survived it. We didn't have to do that. But I came out of it knowing that I wasn't a coward, and I've known that for the rest of my life. So for all the things I hated about Korea and the things I hate about war, which I do hate, I came out of it with one advantage, which fostered one of my pet phrases is use the difficulty. And that's how I use that difficulty. When I was a young actor in repertory, I came very young, and I came on rehearsals, and I was playing a drunken man. And I came on, and then the producer said, "Just a minute, Michael, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm drunk in this scene." So he said, "I know you're drunk in this scene. What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm playing a drunk." He said, "No, you're not." He said, "You're playing an actor." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, a drunk is a man who is trying to speak properly and walk straight. You're an actor who is trying to speak in a mumbled voice and walk crooked." And there he described movie acting to me in one sentence. And the same thing he did when I had a crying scene. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm crying, blah, blah, blah." And he said, "No," he said, he said, "When a man cries, it's the last thing he wants to do." He said he would do anything but cry. He will stop himself crying, no matter how tragic it is. And he would do everything. And only when he's completely defeated emotionally will he start to cry properly. He said he will do anything but cry, a real man. He said, "You are an actor who is trying to cry." Remember, and he described again, movie acting. That's a complete description of movie acting. The hardest scene I've had to do on camera was in Harry Brown, crying. And I had to do that, and I did that. If you saw a movie I did called Harry Brown, you'd see me cry, and you'd see the man doing that, doing everything but cry, and then having to break down because he was so unhappy. what it was in those days, everybody I knew was not famous, and nobody I knew didn't become famous. It's like I had this friend called David Barron who was an actor, and he said to me, he said, I'm gonna write a play, and you're gonna be in it. I said, all right, David, you know. He said, I'm fed up with this. I'm gonna be a playwright. He said, but he said, David Barron's not my real name. I'm gonna write under my real name. I said, what's your real name, David? He said, Harold Pinter, you know. And I was in his first play at the Royal Court, called The Room. And you meet people like that. And the other actor I was with was John Osborne. He said, I'm going to write a play. And he said, I've nearly finished it. I said, what's it called? He said, Look Back in Anger. I went, oh, great, lovely. You know, and it was time after time that you met people that they just, everyone I knew, Peter O'Toole, he was in the play. He became a movie star. I was his understudy. He became a massive star, you know. Albert Finney, Tom Courtenay, they all became stars. And these were guys I knew. Terence Stamp, he became a star, you know. I shared a flat with him. And so it was one of those eras like that, you know, where everybody became someone. I came along at a time when social life in England was changing and people were starting to write about working class people. You know, movies were starting to be made about working. My first job when I came to London, I was an understudy for Peter O'Toole, who was in a play, and he became a star in the play, a fabulous actor. And he became a star in this play called The Long and the Short and the Tall, which was the first British play ever written about private soldiers in the British Army. I mean, and then like Bill Norton wrote Alfie, you know, about an ordinary English. John Osborne wrote Look Back in Anger. And they were the first playwrights to write about working class people in Britain, I promise you. Society changed when people wrote films about working class people, and working class people went to see them. See, because when I was a young man, when I went to see a war film, I went to see American films. Because the American films, From Here to Eternity and all those, Naked and the Dead, were all about private soldiers. English war films were all about officers. You know, I'd been a soldier. I didn't want to see a picture about officers. I came out of a repertory theatre in the country, and I came to London, and I didn't have a telephone, and there was a club called the Arts Theatre Club, where all the out-of-work actors used to be in the bar, the coffee bar in the basement, and it was at Leicester Square, which is like Broadway in New York, all the big cinemas and theatres. And every night I used to go and phone my agent to see if there was a job at 6 o'clock in a phone booth on Leicester Square. And because my name was Micklewhite, I'd called myself, and I didn't want to use that name. In repertory, I was called Michael White. And then one night I got a job, and the woman said, my agent, Josephine, said to me, she said, you've got to change your name because you've got to join Equity, the trade union. I said, yes. She said, and there is another Michael White in the trade union. So she said, you can call yourself Michael, but you can't call yourself White. She said, and I need a name now because I'm going to call a producer, and I've got to say your name and tell him who's going to play the part. So he said, give me a surname. So I looked around the cinemas, and one of my favourite actors is Humphrey Bogart. And on the Odeon Leicester Square at that time was the Caine Mutiny with Humphrey Bogart. And I said, Michael Caine. He said, okay. He said, how do you spell it? I said, C-A-I-N-E. That's it. If I'd have gone to Leicester Square Theatre, I'd have been Michael 101 Dalmatians. It was just keep going at what I did. I tried to make myself better every day, and eventually someone noticed it, namely Cy Enfield, who was the director of Zulu. He saw me in a play, and my first play in the West End, called Next Time I'll Sing to You. And I played a Cockney in that, and he wanted to cast me as a Cockney corporal. It was about the military, and I was going to be a Cockney corporal. And I went for the audition, and I didn't have a phone and he said, "I'm sorry, Michael." He said, "We've cast a corporal, but I couldn't call you. You don't have a phone." I said, "No, I don't have a phone." So it was okay because I've been turned down a lot of parts, and I was in a very long bar at the Prince of Wales Theatre in West End in London, a very long bar, and I always regard that long bar as the secret of my success, because if it had been shorter, I wouldn't be here. If the bar had been shorter, my film career might not have happened, because I got to the door, I was just opening it, and Cy Enfield said, "Come back here," he said. And I was cast as a Cockney corporal, and he looked at me, and I was tall, skinny, blonde. He said, "You look more like an officer to me." He said, "You don't look like a corporal. A corporal would be sort of tougher looking." So he said, "Can you do a posh accent?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I've been in repertory for 9 years. I've played hundreds of posh people." And he cast me as the officer in Zulu, which started my career. And the thing about that was, thinking in terms of the British class system, if he had been an Englishman, that director, even if he'd been a left-wing communist, he would not have cast me as an officer, I promise you. But sometimes you don't know when something good is happening. For instance, I played a very posh officer in Zulu. And now I didn't want to spend the rest of my life playing posh officers, and I don't have a naturally posh accent, and I'm not a naturally posh officer. It was a performance. But it brought me all the career that I ever had. And I've never played a person like that again since, someone as posh as that, I played a lot of posh people, but it was no indication of what I was going to do as an actor, Zulu, but it brought me to attention. I was having dinner. I was sharing a flat with an actor called Terence Stamp. And we were having dinner in a restaurant. And Harry Saltzman, one of the producers of the Bond films, was making films, the Ipcress File. And he bought the novel from Len Dayton. And he was in this restaurant, and he sent me a message saying, "At the end of your meal, would you please have a coffee with me?" And he was with his wife and kids, and I went over, and he gave me Ipcress File. He'd just seen Zulu that night. Now, Ipcress File was a sort of Cockney working class spy. He had just seen Zulu with a posh, very posh officer. Absolutely nothing to do with the other two. And I asked him about that. I said, "You've just seen Zulu?" The officer said, "No, you probably played it." He said, "It's about screen presence, Michael. Once you see the present, once you're on screen, you've either got screen presence or you haven't. And there's absolutely nothing you can do about it." I didn't know I had it. I didn't know what it was, but it seemed that I had. Ipcress File made me famous in England. Alfie made me famous in America, because I got nominated for an Academy Award the first time. And it was the first movie. They made a lot of British movies, but they never got a release in America. Alfie got released in America, and a general release, and what the difference was between the stars of my generation, like Sean Connery, Richard Burton, Peter O'Toole, Albert Finney, is we all became stars in America. Before that, British movie stars were stars in Britain, not America as well. Lots of British actors went to America and became stars. Cary Grant did it. Olivia de Havilland and Joan Fontaine were both English. Sean Connery, Sean, what happened with Sean, how Sean got into show business, he was I think he was Mr. Edinburgh. He was a big weightlifter. And they were doing South Pacific, and there's a song in it called "There's Nothing Like a Dame," sung by all these sailors, big, robust sailors. And they only had small chorus boys, and it didn't look right, them singing this song, "There's Nothing Like a Dame." So they went out to look for great big masculine men, and of course they went to weightlifting places, and they found Sean. And Sean was in the chorus of South Pacific, and they opened on the Thursday, And on the Saturday night, there was a party to which I took 2 girls. And he came after the show late, about 11 o'clock. And he walked in and he saw me with 2 girls. And he walked straight up to me and introduced himself and took one of the girls. So that's how I met Sean Connery. The first big famous person I ever met was John Wayne. And he was exactly like I expected him to be. I was staying at the Beverly Hills Hotel. And I was there on my own because I was there to make a movie called Gambit with Shirley MacLaine. But she went over the schedule on what she was doing and didn't turn up. So nobody knew me in Hollywood, knew I was there except Shirley MacLaine and the producers and directors of the movie. And they left me in the hotel, and I used to sit in the lobby to look for famous people, film stars. And John Wayne came in one day and signed into the hotel. And then he saw me sitting there, and he said to me, "What's your name, kid?" I said, "Michael Caine." He said, "You in that movie, Alfie?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You're going to be a big star, kid." I said, "Well, thank you, Mr. Wayne." He said, "But let me give you some advice." I said, "What?" He said, talk slow, and don't say too much." I said, "Thank you, sir. Thank you very much." He said, and I had on suede shoes. And he said to me, "And never wear suede shoes." I said, "What?" He said, "Never wear suede shoes." I said, "Why not?" He said, "Well, because remember, I just told you you're going to be famous." He said, "You'll be in the toilet taking a pee, and the guy next to you is going to go, 'Michael Caine,' and he's going to pee all over your shoes. So never wear suede shoes." Oh, well, he said, talk low, and don't say too much. I then made 20 pictures where I never stopped talking very quickly because he was a cowboy, you see. And the cowboys don't say too much, do they? Because they fall off otherwise. They keep talking. Oh, I tell you another thing with cowboys. Richard Widmark told me, he said, I was talking to him, he said, "What did you say?" He said, talk in this ear, he said. So I'm a bit deaf in that one. So I said, so I'm sorry. I said, "What is it?" He said, "It's playing all those cowboy parts." He said, "Someone always shooting a bloody gun and it goes, it's always been in my left ear." He said, "And you go deaf." He said, all actors who play cowboys in America are deaf in one ear." I said, "What?" Oh, it's fabulous because we were a happy family, which is the most important thing. We had just about enough money to be happy, and to feed ourselves. Well, I didn't feed everybody. But I had a wonderful mother and a great father. But the thing was that from the age of 6 till 12, I never saw my father because he was in the army and he was away in the Second World War. And so I grew up with my mother and a brother, Stanley. And my mother was a wonderful woman. She said she made a man out of the 2 of us with one sentence. When my father went away, an army truck came and collected him. And he got in the truck and waved goodbye, and it went round the corner. And I was 6, and my brother Stanley was 3. And my mother looked at us, and she said, "Well, your dad's gone. Now you 2 have to look after me." And she made little men out of us in one sentence, which still stays with me. I look after everybody. It's amazing. It's one sentence, and I was 6. The family used to go away for the weekend, and there was me and another boy called Clarence. I always remember Clarence was his name. And they used to lock us up on a Friday night in a room under the stairs and release us Monday morning when they came back from the weekend. And they used to leave us tins of open sardines and bottles of water. And that's what we lived on. And Clarence and I all came out in sores, obviously, with this diet and everything. My mother couldn't get down because the Germans were bombing the railway. And then they didn't bomb them permanently. There were pauses, they couldn't get through or something went wrong. And there was a time when she could. After about 3 weeks, we'd been evacuated. And she came down and found us, and took us away. And she hit the woman so hard that she nearly went to prison herself. When she met the woman, she really beat her up. And she nearly went to jail. But when the police saw me and Clarence, they forgave her. Oh, well, we were covered in sores and everything, everywhere. you realise what diet can. I mean, I didn't know. I was 7 by that time. Yeah, but I just looked in the mirror and I knew that something was drastically wrong. I suffer from incredible claustrophobia now. You know, I can't. You can't shut a door on me anywhere. I mean, the cupboard was, well, it was just under the staircase. It was under the stairs. If you think of a staircase and a cupboard under the stairs and put 2 little boys in it, that's what it was. You couldn't get food with any chemicals in it. There were no chemicals in it. All food was organic, and you couldn't get sugar. It came from a long way away, and you couldn't get sugar drinks. There was no Coca-Cola or anything like that. None of the sugar, which is the most terrible thing. The chemicals are for the war effort, and the sugar came from the Caribbean, and they couldn't get there because the German submarines were sinking the ships. And so what happened was that those of us who grew up in the war, we grew up on the most incredible diet. It was fabulous. I mean, we didn't know. I mean, I didn't know about bloody sugar and everything. But you didn't get a lot of fruit. You got a lot of apples and pears, which are done in England. But the only tropical fruit was every child in England at Christmas got an apple and an orange. You got 1 apple and 1 orange a year for 6 years. And I grew up like that, and it was very fortunate, you know, that using the difficulty again without knowing it, you know, is to grow up on organic food. I mean, everybody said you couldn't get any other food but organic. You couldn't get it. What happened was we in the war we got bombed out in the war, and we were in the country, so it didn't hurt us. And it was amazing, bombed out, because if you go and see the building where I live now, it's still there. And they say, I thought Michael Caine said he got bombed out. This building's 100 years old. What it was, in the next street to us, a rocket dropped. You know, when the Germans had the rockets, they dropped. And they just obliterated a street. And they were silent. They weren't like the buzz bombs. And this, in Horseman Street, it was called. And I was there the other day, and it's just full of flats. There's no street left. There's just a sign. And what happened was when that rocket dropped on Horseman Street, it blew all our doors and windows out. It didn't hurt the building. It just blew all the doors and windows out, so we couldn't live in it. And they put us in what they used to call prefabricated houses. They were made of asbestos, and they came from Canada. They were made in Canada. And I was in this house, and you would say, oh, poor boy. This was the most fabulous house for me. For a start, we had a little garden. We'd never had a garden. And for the first time in my life, I lived in a house with electric light, central heating, a bathroom, and an indoor toilet, and hot water. And I'd never lived in a house like that. So for me, this prefab, which to everybody was a load of crap, was the height of luxury. I come from a very tough and rough background, the Elephant and Castle, where I grew up. But, I mean, I was in a gang, but we were in a gang, my gang. We weren't in a gang in order to beat people up or do anything. We were in a gang to defend ourselves so that we never got beaten up. You know what I mean? Because the Elephant and Castle, when I grew up, there were the gangsters were called spivs, which is VIPs backwards. That's a very Cockney thing. And they wore trilby hats. They all wore trilby hats. They all had razor blades sewn in the brim, so they just whack you if you know. And it was very rough area. And some of my uncles were spivs and that, you know, but I wasn't rough in that. I was rough in self-defense. I would never attack anybody. I was more sensitive than that. I became an actor, you know. I didn't become a thug. No, I'm tough. I'm fabulous until you get the wrong side, and then it's quite a surprise to come. I did a movie called Get Carter, and that was based on a gangster that I knew at the Elephant and Castle. And I mean, I knew he'd never been charged with murder, but I knew he'd killed at least 4 people. Well, we all knew. Not I knew. We all knew he'd killed at least 4 people. And I made this movie about a gangster, and I based it on him, called Get Carter. And I was in a discotheque, and he came in, and he saw me, and he said, "I just seen that movie of yours." He said, "That film, Get Carter." I said, "Yeah." I said, "What do you think?" He said, "Biggest load of rubbish I've ever seen in my life." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because of you." He said, "Look at you." He said, "You're playing a gangster." He said, "Robbing everybody." He said, "And you have no responsibilities." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You weren't a married man, Michael, with children. You were just doing it." Letting himself off because he had 6 kids, you know. And so I thought, oh, all right. Whatever he said, I agreed with, obviously. Because I was an amateur actor in the youth club. I was, I mean, I went in for all the wrong reasons. I was in the basketball team, and I used to go up on the roof of the club to play basketball. And I always went past this door with some windows in it, and all the prettiest girls in the club were in there. And I said, "What's that? Why are they all in there?" And they said, "It's the drama class." So I joined the drama class. There was a very beautiful girl I wanted to kiss. I thought maybe I'll be able to play with her and I'll have to kiss her, you know, because I was very shy with girls and all that. And I didn't know what to do. And so I joined the drama class. And I became absolutely, I was enthralled by drama and acting and everything. The first time I came on and I got a laugh. And I thought that was funny. I hadn't said anything yet, and I didn't realise my flies were undone. And I always remembered that laugh. You know, I was so happy to get the laugh. You know, it was fabulous. And I remember I was a little tiny. My first little part in the youth club was in RUR, which was a famous play about robots called Rossum's Universal Robots, and I played a robot. And it said, "Expressionless, emotionless person." And Michael Caine was perfect. Not Michael Caine, Maurice Micklewhite. I was only 12. Getting laughs and controlling people, making people cry, doing that, being able to do that. But I mean, when I think of people saying, "I want to be rich and famous," I became an actor knowing absolutely, positively, that I would never be rich and famous. Because I had a thick Cockney accent, which in those days, no one wrote a part for anyone with a thick. You might be the policeman who comes in at the end. My accent was like that. You talk like that. And you're all a bit higher. You're up here like that. Yeah. Because they talk through their nose and that. And but of course, actors speak from the diaphragm because you have to reach the back of the theatre. Maurice talked like that, very quietly, with a slight menace in the voice, and always, because I was always suspicious of everyone around me, because you never knew who it was, what was going to happen. So you always kept a very straight face and talked like that, but quite quietly, and the accent was a bit thicker than it is now, and you just worry about things. Yeah, the first review I got for uh, the Ipcris file, the first review I saw was very complimentary to me. And I thought, oh my God, I've made it. Because the first time I ever played the lead in a movie was a picture called The Ipcris File, which was a spy story. I'd already been in a successful movie called Zulu, but I played a very posh officer in that. I didn't play anyone like me. And the Ipcris File, it was a sort of Cockney spy, you know. So it was more like the real me, you know. Not that I was ever a spy, but at least I was a Cockney. Yeah, great big dark frames. And a wonderful thing happened. There was a very famous silent film star who wore glasses called Harold Lloyd. And he came to England and he took me to dinner when he was very old, you know. But it's very funny because the attitude then, you were talking about the attitude towards women and everything. And there was a bit of an attitude like that towards men of a certain kind, in as much as in Ipcress File, I wore glasses, and I was trying to seduce this girl, and, 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 and the way I was doing it, I was going to cook her dinner in my flat. And so I went shopping in a supermarket, and they saw the rushes in America and said, leading man looks effeminate. He's cooking, shopping, and wearing glasses. The Swarm was about attack of bees, and it was made in Hollywood. And the reason I made it is I was so impressed because I was with Henry Fonda, Fred MacMurray, Olivia de Havilland, and Jose Ferrer, all the big Hollywood stars. And this was my second movie in Hollywood. I just made Gambit with Shirley MacLaine. Shirley brought me to Hollywood. And we were making this picture, and I thought it was going to be great because all these stars, and I realized eventually, there was one scene where I realized that maybe the film wasn't any good, because it was Henry Fonda and me. We had a scene with no jackets on. We had white shirts. And there was this big scene where all the bees were above us in a big swarm in this sort of greenhouse. And halfway through the scene, I was looking at him and he was looking at me, and there were all little black dots all over our shirts. And the bees were all crapping on us. And unfortunately, that was the first review. We didn't know at the time, but that was the first review. It was a load of crap. But I tell it now, here's a use the difficulty. I was in this, and I realized very quickly that it was a load of rubbish. And what I did, I was with as I've just said, some of the most experienced and famous Hollywood stars. I never went into my dressing room when I wasn't in a shot. I sat and watched them all day, every day, to see what they did and how they did it, you know? And that was an extreme example of me using the difficulty. And I was covered in bee crap as well all the time. Funnily enough, what they have is an incredible professionalism. You know, they know their lines, and they don't muck about. And there's no massive temperament with them. Even someone like Elizabeth Taylor, who was a massive star. It always makes me laugh when people say to me, why are men paid so much more than women? I say, have you ever made a picture with Elizabeth Taylor? I said she was paid about 300 times more than I was, you know, and I was on screen more than she was. I did a picture called Sleuth with Laurence Olivier, and we rehearsed it for 2 weeks because it was just the two of us. There's only two people in the movie. And he was fumbling a bit the first week of rehearsals. He wasn't very impressive. The second week, he put a moustache on, stuck a moustache on his face. And he started acting, and it was brilliant. And we were all stunned. It was the real Laurence Olivier, you know? And we all said, well, that's fantastic. And I said, you wore a moustache, and he said to me, I cannot act with my own face. He said, I can't do it. He said, and I tried. You saw me in the first week's rehearsal, and it didn't work, and I've done it. But the other wonderful thing with Laurence Olivier, talking about a class system, I'm Cockney and all that. When I was going to do this picture with Laurence Olivier, before we started rehearsals, he sent me a letter. He was Lord Olivier. And he sent me a letter saying, it has occurred to me that you may be wondering how you should address me because of my title. He said, well, the moment we shake hands, I'll be Larry forever, which I thought was a great thing. We all work together, you know, we're friends. We were friends, you know, I mean, especially Jack. Because Jack, it's one of those things, you know, it's amazing. But Jack was the one, when I retired and went to Miami, I wasn't going to do another movie, and it was Jack who I met there. He was living there at that time, and then we became friends. And then one day he said, He said, "I've got a script called Blood and Wine. There's a good part for you in it." I said, "I'm retired, Jack. I'm over." He said, read it. And I read it, and it was great. And he was the one who brought me back to working, because I hadn't worked for 2 years. And I was very happy in Miami with my restaurants and everything. And I came back, and that's what started this whole thing of going again. For a start, we were great friends, and then he's one of the best actors in the world, best movie actors I've ever come across. And he's funny. I mean, he has a sort of attitude towards things. I remember one day we were in Miami. We shot this movie in Miami where we were living, and we had to shoot sunset. And we were walking along, and the assistant director was shouting to everybody, "Hurry up! Hurry up!" And I started to run, and he said, "Michael, don't run." He said, "Let's just walk fast so that no one notices." He said, "Well, if you start running," he said, "they'll know that we're late." That was the way he looked at life. Oh, it was easy because we were great friends, and we just had the best time. And it was a wonderful movie. And John Huston, Christopher Plummer played Rudyard Kipling. Couldn't get any better than that. I remember I was working with John Huston, who was one of my favorite directors. And I said to him, one day, "John, you never give me any direction." And John Huston said, "You get paid a great deal of money to do this, Michael. You don't need me to tell you what to do." So I said, "All right." But then he said, he said another thing. He did give me one direction. I was doing a speech, and I thought I was doing very well, and I hadn't dried or fluffed or anything. And he said, "Cut." And I said, "What?" He said, "You can speak faster, Michael. He's an honest man." So whenever I meet someone who says, "Hello, Michael, how are you?" I go, "Wait a minute, what's he up to?" But I remember Sean Connery, at the end of the movie, had to walk on a very dangerous bridge, little tiny bridge over a big drop. And and Sean got to the day of shooting, and he looked at it, and he said to John, he said, "I was here yesterday," he said, "and that bridge was straight. Today it's crooked." John said, "Yesterday you didn't have to walk on it. Today you do. That's why it's crooked." No, I tried to walk on the bridge the day before with Sean, because he was testing it, but I couldn't. I didn't have the courage. It was too high. It was miles up. It was terrible. I got about 2 yards out and came back again. I was so proud when I won the Academy Award. But the first Academy Award, I wasn't there. I was making another dreadful movie, Jaws of Revenge. They said, "Will you do 2 weeks on Jaws of Revenge?" I said, "Yes." And I'd made this picture with Woody Allen, and Woody was very anti-Oscars, so you knew you'd never get nominated for Hannah and Her Sisters. So you knew you'd never get nominated for a Woody Allen picture. And so they did this movie at the time of the Oscars. I said, "Well, I'm not going to get nominated." And I did it. And of course, I got nominated and I won. I was stunned. I was stunned that I got nominated, and I was stunned that I won it. But I was in Nassau making Jaws of Revenge, which everyone tells me was a terrible picture. But as I always say, I got paid a great deal of money. So I said, I never saw the movie, but I saw the house it bought my mother, and it was fabulous. She didn't understand it really, because one day she said to me, "How much do you get for a film?" So I said, £1 million. And she said, "How much is that?" She had no idea. But I said, "It means that you never have to work again in your life. You get a free house, you get everything." And she did. My mother, I'll give you an example of my mother. I did a movie called Zulu, which was my first big part, lots of dialogue and everything. And I said to her, come to the premiere with me. And she said, no. So she said, you know, you've got a girlfriend, take a date, whatever. I forget who it was. But anyway, she said, no, I'm not coming to the premiere. You know, it's your evening. And I'm going into the premiere with whoever the girl was, I have no idea. And I see my mother in the crowd, waving. I got so angry with her, you know. But that's so typical of my mother. Another time, I took her to Beverly Hills, and it was February in England, you know, so it was cold and snowy and damp. And Beverly Hills was all sunny, with all flowers growing and everything. And as we were driving along in the car through Beverly Hills, I said, what do you think of Beverly Hills, Mum? She said, it's so lovely. All that hysteria growing up the walls. It's wisteria. And I said, she was a bit of a Mrs. Malaprop, you know? And she said, all that hysteria growing up the walls. And I thought, you've got Beverly Hills absolutely right. I was great friends with David Hockney, and his mum came to Beverly Hills. And I said, bring her over to my house with my mum, and we'll have tea on Sunday. So they came over, and Mrs. Hockney was looking out the window around Beverly Hills. And I said, what do you think of it? She said, oh, it's lovely, she said. Lovely. She said, talking with a country accent, North Country accent like that. She said, there's one thing I don't understand. I said, what that? She said, well, there's all this lovely sunshine, and nobody's got any washing hanging out. I said, you hang out washing in Beverly Hills, you get shot. Oh, blimey, yeah, we lived in Hollywood for 10 years. And my wife is a fabulous woman, and everybody loved her. It wasn't me, it was her. That she made our social life. My wife is an amazing woman. But we had a wonderful time in Beverly Hills. And my youngest daughter grew up in Beverly Hills. You know, now we're trying to get a period where my grandchildren are off school, and we can take them to Beverly Hills so she can show them where she grew up. Well, I was with my best male friend, and we were going out every night to discotheques, you know, getting bombed out of our minds and chasing girls and all that. And then one night I said, let's do something we never do, watch television. We'll stay in. And I'm a good cook, and he knew I was a good cook. I said, I'll cook dinner, and we'll just watch the television. So we watched the television. It wasn't very good. And then an advert came on for Maxwell House Coffee, and a Brazilian girl, a dark Brazilian girl was in it. And I fell in love with this girl on the television. And I thought, well, I said, and I had some money. I was working, you know, I was already a star in movies. And so I had plenty of money. And I said to my mate, I said, we'll go to Brazil in the morning. I said, we'll find her. I've got to find this girl. And then we got sort of restless. He said, well, there was a discotheques, you know, we went to this discotheque, you know, and with my best friend owned it, you know, it was called Tramp. And Johnny Gold owned it. And I said, let's go down and have a drink with Johnny. I got all excited. I didn't want to go to bed. And we were sitting there, and another man came in, and he said, oh, hello, you three sitting there, no girls, what's going on? And I said, no, I said, I just came out for a drink. I said, I'm going to Brazil tomorrow. He said, what for? I said, well, I've seen this girl on television. She's Brazilian. I said, and she's beautiful, and I'm in love with her, and I'm going to find her. He said, I've been watching television all evening. I didn't see any beautiful girls. I said, no, she wasn't in a program. I said, she was in a commercial. So he said, what commercial? I said, Maxwell House Coffee. He said, we make that. I said, you make that commercial? He said, yeah. He said, that girl's not Brazilian. She's Indian. He said she lives in the Fulham Road, and I got her phone number off him. And then I phoned her, and she wouldn't go out with me. And then on the 11th night that I phoned her, and this is a very important thing that I thought about. I'd been married to this woman very happily with a fabulous life for 47 years. And on the 11th night, I had said, if she doesn't go out with me, I'm not going to phone again. And that night, she came out with me, not because she wanted to. She couldn't get rid of me on the phone. She was going to get rid of me personally. But it didn't work out that way because we met and fell in love instantly at first sight. Oh, I didn't tell her I wanted to marry her on the phone. What I did was I got her to come out with me eventually, and she came out with me in order to get rid of me personally, because she couldn't get rid of me over the phone. And I was phoning, a nuisance. I was phoning every evening. I'd just seen you in the commercial. Will you play, would you like to have some dinner this evening? Any restaurant in London you want, and all that. And I picked her up in a Rolls Royce, because I owned a Rolls Royce by that time. I just think it's just love, that's all. It's just true love. We just happen to love each other so much, and we're devoted to each other. And we never spend any time apart. I had an experience recently. My wife's mother, who lives in New York, was not very well. And my wife flew to New York for 4 days to see her. And that was the first time I'd been separated from my wife in 46 years. I'd never been on my own, ever. But I was very lucky because I have an older daughter, and she spent the time with me. It was the happiest movie I ever made. It was called Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, with Steve Martin, and who was wonderful, and Glenn Headley, who was great. Glenn, as a woman, died of a heart attack at 51. You don't connect heart attacks to women, let alone women of 51. And Glenn, I was so unhappy about that, but I had a wonderful time. We had a great time, the three of us. We were in my favorite place, the French Riviera. I had a villa they'd rented for me for the whole summer between two of my closest friends, Roger Moore and the composer Leslie Brickus. And I had my family with me, my children, everybody, all the summer. And it was the happiest film I ever made. Well, it's quite weird because, you see, there's no such thing as American accent. There's about 50 of them, And I did a movie, The Cider House Rules. My dialogue coach said, do an American accent, So I did it. He said, that's California. He says, very good, but you're playing New England. So I said, so I learned New England, which has more English in it. You know what I mean? And I did it, and I got wonderful reviews for my accent in New England. I won the Academy Award for the part. And the British critics, because of the English it was in, it said, Michael Caine can't do an American accent. But when did I also... I did another one. I did a Texas accent in a movie. I forget the title now. The kids love it. Oh, my grandchildren love this, but I forget it. Anyway, I did a Texas accent. And on the first day, I said, I was talking to the coach. He said, let me explain the Texas accent to you. I said, he said, all the words lean on each other. And of course, I knew immediately what everybody talks like that, and that just leans on each other. It's quite amazing how clever they are at doing these things. Have one more go, see if it works. If something comes along, do it. And well, I see retirement. As I said, in the movies retire you. You don't retire from the movies. But if you're doing a job that you hate, because you can't wait to retire and get your pension and sit and watch telly. So it's a completely different attitude if you're someone who's doing what they like doing. I used to do acting for nothing. People didn't used to drill roads for nothing. Be very careful about retiring because you don't know what's out there. What happened to me is I retired twice. I wrote 2 autobiographies, and what happened to me was I was about 65 and I got a script from a producer, and I sent it back. I said, the part's too small. He said, I didn't want you to read the lover. I wanted you to read the father. And I thought, oh my God, it's over, because if you don't get the girl, you're no longer a movie star, you know? But what I didn't realize is that when you get older, you don't get the girl, you get the part. So you don't get to kiss the girl, you get the Academy Award. But I didn't know all that. I mean, I went to Miami. I started a whole new life for the winter, you know, and I bought an apartment there and a restaurant, and I was having a wonderful time when Chris Nolan turned up with Batman. Christopher Nolan, it was one Sunday morning, my house in the country, and the front door is glass. And there was a man standing there with a script in his hand. And I answered it, and he said, and I said, come in. And directly he said his name, I knew who he was, because he'd done 3 wonderful, very small movies, but artistic, very, award-winning movies. And I thought, oh, this is wonderful. You know, I'll get something here. It might be Academy Award or something. You know, it'd be a great part. So he said, I've got a script here for you. I said, what's it called? He said, Batman Begins. I said, Batman? He said, yeah, because this is a great big thing, you know, and this guy only made 3 little tiny movies. And I thought, my God, how did he get to do that, you know? And I thought to myself, well, I'm too old to play Batman. I think I'm going to be the butler. So I said to Chris, I said, who am I going to be, the butler? He said, yeah, you're going to be the butler. So I said, oh, well, I said, what do I say? Dinner is served. Would you like another glass of red wine? Is that my dialogue? He said, no. He said, read it. He said, because the butler was Batman's foster father, because he died. He said, so he's much more important than that. And then I read it. And for me, that was an incredible thing, because there I was, and I'd retired twice. And here I was starting a whole new career, and then made 6 of the best movies with Chris Nolan I'd ever made. I got an Academy Award for Cider House Rules. And this was after I'd retired twice. Batman made a difference because I'm recognized by young people, because young people all saw Batman. You know, I was walking along Regent Street in London the other day, and there was this party of little Japanese teenagers, and they all started going, Alfred, Alfred, and my name was Alfred, and they'd all seen me in Batman, you know. So I'm standing there with a load of teenage Japanese girls signing autographs. I'm 84. I want to be better than I was last time. That's it. That's all my ambition is, you know. I mean, what happens is in the movie business, you don't retire. The movie business retires you. And if a producer have enough confidence in you at your age, whatever it is, but you remember there's people in movies who are 85. So what do? You get an actor who's 85 to play it, you know? And it's a big compliment that they choose you, you know, they choose me, in other words, you know? And so I repaid them with the hardest work that I can do and the best performance I can give. It's always last minute. It's relaxation with me, uh, um, to get rid of the nerves and everything. The last thing I do before I go on set is I bend right over so that the blood goes to my brain and I remember the lines, you know? But I, I disappear into the character. And I'm very, I have a lots of, some actors, you know, it's all tension and everything. I work out relaxation. I'm telling jokes and making people laugh right up until the last minute with the technicians, you know. And I work on a very relaxed set because I was made at night. I was Sir Michael Caine. And I go on the set and I immediately say to everybody, get rid of what you're going to call him, you know. You say, everyone calls me Michael, okay? And that's it. And so you start off like that. And I act out of relaxation. And then I go right down to an absolute relaxed thing and I walk on and I'm the guy, whoever he is. Learning the lines, it's the hardest part. It's so difficult to learn massive long speeches. You know, any actor will tell you it's a nightmare. And getting up at 6:30 in the morning, that's tough. I get up at 9 deliberately now just to prove I'm not working. I don't forget the lines because I'm old, but what it does, it takes me 10 times longer to learn them. You know, I used to learn a page of dialogue. The director would say, "Oh, we've written a new page, learn that." And I go, "Yeah, all right, ready." Now I say, "Well, I'll come back next week." I don't know. I think it's because I'm not a movie star, so I'm not relying on my looks, fortunately. and and um, I'm also an actor. I was a stage actor, and I do characters, and I'm cheap. that, that keeps you in a movie. Well, but cheap for movie stars who get $10 and $20 million. I don't get $10 and $20 million for a movie. And there are there are always older parts. You know, I mean, I did one with Morgan Freeman and Alan Carr, going in style, about three old age burglars. You know, and so and what they did also in the movie industry, which when they released the Gold Hotel with Maggie Smith in India, the Marigold Hotel, that made a fortune. And they didn't know it. And then suddenly, and I remember they did an examination of Marigold Hotel, the Producers Association. They go, what they had forgotten, that there was a load of old people at home watching television. They were making movies for young people. And these people had no movies to go out and see. And they started to make them. And they're still making movies for old people and making a lot of money on them. I'll tell you, I'm using the difficulty. I have a book out called Blowing the Bloody Doors Off. What happened was, how I wrote that book was I was very busy and I was going to write the book anyway. Then I broke my ankle and I was sitting watching TV all day for 9 months. And instead of doing that, I turned the TV off and wrote the book. And that was using the difficulty. That's my most recent example of doing that. One of the reasons I wrote the book is I worry about people like me, like I was, a nobody from nowhere who knew nothing about anything, and you're sitting there, what do I do with my life, you know? And the first part of that book is telling you is to find out what you want to do and become the best at it that you can possibly be. And don't worry about becoming rich and famous, because if you're going to be, you will, and if you're not, you're not, but at least you'll be happy. Another reason I wrote the book too was I was watching television one day, and I was watching them. They were interviewing young people about what they wanted to do with their lives, and everybody explained what they wanted to do. But I noticed that many of them said they wanted to be rich and famous, which I thought was the wrong way of starting out life, trying to be rich and famous, because if you're probably guaranteeing that you will never be. The right way to start out is to find out what you really want to do and be the best at it that you could possibly be. That's the way to do it. Use the difficulty of flop movies. The thing is when you make a flop movie, it means you made a bad choice. Then you make another one, it's another bad choice, another bad choice. Then there's the other actor who sits there and says, I'm very good. I wouldn't have done that movie. I wouldn't have done that movie. I wouldn't have done that movie. And then I get the movie that it's a big success for me. And he gets a movie which could be a big success for him. But he hasn't worked for 2 years, and I haven't stopped working. I was making crap films, but I was working. And I go straight into the great film, absolutely ready to work. And he's practically crapping himself because he hasn't worked for 2 years. And there's use the difficulty of making flop movies. They keep you working, keep you experienced, and keep you going. So to bring that back to sort of someone, if to a young person, you say you must keep going. Just don't sit there waiting for the big thing to come. Keep going, If it's an actor, you do a small part just to keep going. Don't make great spaces in your life where you don't do what you do. Yeah, you always try to make something good of it. You know what I mean? It was like, as I told you in The Swarm, when I wasn't acting, I didn't sit in my dressing room watching television or anything. I sat and watched the other famous actors, experienced actors like Fonda, big Hollywood actors working, and I had an attitude towards life where I never took any time off. I was always doing something, and I'm still doing it. You know, I've written three books, three autobiographies, sort of, with including this one, and I'm writing a fiction book now. You know, I just keep writing. I just keep doing something. Yes, I am, but from a point of view of religions, my father was a Catholic, my mother was a Protestant. I was educated when I was evacuated because of London schooling by Jews, and I'm married to a Muslim. So I'm not, but I do believe in God. And the only reason I believe in God is because I have to. And the reason of that is that if you've had my life, you'd have to believe in God. There was a very famous American boxer called Rocky Marciano who wrote a book called Somebody Up There Likes Me. And if he hadn't used that title, I would have used it. You've got to stay in motion. You must, and I didn't know that. I've learned that from my own experience. Because whenever the great script came along, I was absolutely ready. Because I'd just finished one a month ago, not 2 years. You imagine you haven't worked for 2 years and you get this great part. But that comes from a movie called The Italian Job, where we were crooks and we were trying to steal some gold. And I had this explosive expert, and he'd put explosives on the door of the van where the gold was, and to blow the doors off so that we could get the gold inside. And in the movie, when the explosion goes, the entire van and everything is blown into smithereens. And I look at him and I say, "You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off." And that's where that title comes from. One of the best ones I saw was Tom Hanks. He did it on Saturday Night Live, but he was very quiet, very, very quiet, and very, you know, not. I mean, we met a couple of times, but we're not friends or anything. But he seemed to get it right. But there is what they do is when I played Cockney parts, they always do my accent as a Cockney, but thicker than my accent that I'm speaking to you now. And this is just a London accent that you can understand. But they go, not many people know that. That's the way impersonations go. My name is Michael Caine. Not many people know that. That's my impersonation of me. I remember once Richard Burton. You know, I said to him, I saw him in Hamlet when I was a young man. I lived near the Old Vic, the Elephant and Castle where I come from is near the Old Vic. And when I was a very young man, I went and saw him. But I was young, at about 21, 22. And I said to him, I said, when I got to know him later, because I did a picture with Elizabeth, and she was married to Richard, and I was talking to him. I said, I saw you years ago in Hamlet at the Old Vic. I said, the thing that struck me about it, I said, was that it was the fastest Hamlet I've ever seen. He said, you went, to be or not to be, that is a question whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the scenes and arrows of outrageous fortune. I said, it was so bloody fast. And he said, well, you have to remember, Michael, he said, the pub shut at 10:30 then. That's one of my, I did that so you'd hear my impersonation.